All right, Pete Badel, mate. Some breaking news just now broken by yourself. But before we get to that, mate, a massive accomplishment for yourself, mate. Awarded Journalist of the Year, mate. How does that feel? Tell us a bit about the award, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Macca. I went to the Australian Sports Commission Awards last night. I'd only be back in the country 24 hours. I went to London to cover the World Club Challenge in the rugby league, Broncos v Hull KR. So I got back Sunday morning, pretty jet lagged, and then straight to Sydney for the awards last night, and was very very appreciative to be named Journalist of the Year or Sports Journalist of the Year for a couple of entries around rugby league stories, and including just a few. One on Reece Walsh, his dad talking about his mum's drug addiction and how Reece had to overcome that. So that was pretty inspirational from Reece, of course, winning the premiership last year, and also a yarn on Payne Haas talking about his dad on death row. So that was sort of two of the entries that I put in. But yeah, pretty gratifying, Macca. But of course, my other great love is boxing, mate. So we've got plenty to talk about in that space too.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. Always good to have your insight here on the channel. Mate, you broke a big yarn tonight, mate. Liam Paro, some devastating news for him. His fight's gonna be delayed against Lewis Crocker, mate. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Macca, look, this is potentially a real blow for Liam. I'm hearing it's only fresh to hand that I'm hearing that Lewis Crocker may have injured his hand. Now he's claiming that he's injured his hand of some sort, and it looks like the fight will be potentially delayed. Now I'm not saying it won't be off completely, which is good news for Liam, but as we know, he's gone through the ringer, hasn't he, Macca, with obviously Prograis a couple of years ago. And then he had the Paddy Donovan fight just a couple of months ago that was delayed and ended up being scrapped. And then it ended up being a great thing because Lewis Crocker was put in position to fight him and for a world title. And it now looks like it's going to be delayed. So initially, Macca, I heard that the date was around late March, maybe early April, possibly on a double header with Tszyu. And I've just heard that in the last 24 hours, things have changed. Apparently, Crocker is claiming to have a hand injury. A medical certificate has been supplied to Paro's camp. And so it looks like there'll be a delay of about 4 weeks. And let's hope it's not longer, Macca, but it is a bit of a setback for Liam at the moment because he's ready to go. He's been locked in camp, but he may have to wait a little bit longer to get a shot at Lewis Crocker, which is disappointing if it is delayed.
Hmm. There were some murmurs that this could be a double header with Tim Tszyu. If that was to be the case, how big a sort of knock is that to that card that would have been have a world title fight on it?
Oh, look, it's a huge setback in that regard for the optics of the card, Macca. I mean, looking from what I'm told, there's some possible venues they were looking at, maybe Townsville, Melbourne, Wollongong for Tim Tszyu's next fight, and it was potentially going to be a double header with Liam. Now, obviously, Liam's a North Queensland boy, so it would have made some sense to have the fight in Townsville to get a full house there, or at least a big crowd in Townsville. But it doesn't look like that will be the case now. So, look, I'm also hearing on that card we could see Nelson Asofa Solomona, his second pro fight. Of course, he made a real statement on the Nikita Zarafa card. So it'll be exciting to see Nelson back in the ring. I'm hearing too Sam Goodman could be on the card. So if it is in Wollongong, then that's a good sign because Sammy Goodman's a local boy, of course, the Albion Park. So he'll be on that card potentially. But yeah, look, obviously, Macca, the big one, there was always a good sell around Tim Tszyu and Liam Paro as a dynamic duo, but it doesn't look like now that's going to be the case. So the next question is where do they fit this fight in? Because I'm told that Nikita Tszyu could be slated for May potentially. Now, whether he's on that card, I don't know. That's going to have to be worked out by No Limit. But as it stands right now, they're in a bit of limbo on what to do with Liam Paro and just how long they delay this fight.
Hmm. Um, uh, what Paros can't seem to take a trick. He had that the fight fall off on Nikita's card, and now this. You know, what's the sort of realistic time frame on this one, Pete?
Well, look, all hope's not lost, Macca, which is good news. I mean, they're saying 4 weeks, the Crocker camp. So, look, it raises the question: is this fair income? Is this legitimate? Is it a bona fide injury? You know, if the critic or the cynic might say, "Look, they lost the purse bid to No Limit. It was a massive bid, 1.15 million. Matchroom lost it by $27,000. It could be seen as a way to, you know, thumb their nose at No Limit and potentially a bit of gamesmanship there. But look, we can't question Eddie Hearn and his integrity. I mean, look, maybe Lewis has genuinely suffered an injury in training, in sparring, and so he needs time to recover. So look, they're saying 4 weeks, so that pushes it back to May, which could be on Nikita's card if he fights in May. So he could still see a double header with those two. The other. I mean, look, if it takes more time, Mako, they may have to fight in June or July. I don't think it'll be pushed out that far because No Limit want to have Liam in the ring sooner. He's been in training, he's been active, he's had a long camp now, and that was why they wanted to do this fight as soon as possible to potentially catch Crocker a little bit cold. So look, I still think we may see a fight maybe late April, early May, maybe mid-May, but right now it doesn't look like it's going to be around that late March, early April timeframe, which is disappointing for Liam, and not the end of the world because the fight will go ahead in the fullness of time. He just has to be a little bit patient now.
Last time we spoke, mate, you had some news on Tim Tszyu. Lots of talk about a domestic opponent for him, but there's also murmurs they might be looking overseas. Any update on Tim Tszyu?
Yeah, there is an update, Macca. So I could tell you there was some talk. I know we spoke just a couple of weeks ago, and at the time they were looking at an American opponent. Then it morphed when the Spence fight came into play. Obviously, they wanted No Limit looking at more of a domestic opponent to maybe get it, like I guess a stay busy tune up fight, one that wasn't too dangerous if he was to fight Spence later in the year. So I'm now told that they were looking at a couple of Aussie opponents. I'd heard the name Jacob NG. He was apparently amenable to it, but I'm told they couldn't quite come to terms there. So now they've gone international again. I don't think it'll be an American opponent, but I'm pretty confident from what I'm hearing it will be an international opponent. So I've heard a couple of names, but I won't mention them because they're not quite solid enough. But it won't be an Aussie. Is the mail I've got right now. So it'll be an international opponent, likely late March, maybe early April. And like I said before, Townsville, Wollongong, Melbourne, they're the sort of three locations. So but Tim Tszyu, look, it looks like back in the ring soon, and that's beautiful, Macca, because it'll be a wonderful prelude and a preamble to this blockbuster fight against Spence, which looks like it could happen if Tim gets this win in a couple of weeks.
Just a quick one, Pete, because we know you're always busy, mate, breaking yarns. Tim Tszyu Spence, we haven't spoke about that, mate. How solid are those talks?
Well, look, I've spoken to No Limit about this, and they're pretty confident. I mean, they seem to think it's all moving in the right direction. Now, of course, as we know, with boxing negotiations, they can fall over in a heartbeat. They can take a quick turn pretty quickly. I still think I think there's a willingness on both sides to make this happen, Macca. From what I'm hearing from Spencer's camp that they're open to this. I mean, he hasn't fought for 2.5 years. Errol. So he probably thinks that he can beat Tim Tszyu no matter what shape he's in. He probably fancies himself technically to get the job done. But for Tim Tszyu, they view this as a real legacy fight. Talking to Mike Altamura, their strategic matchmaker, so he feels that if Tim gets through this fight, then they're prepared to take Spence on. Now, there was talk about the fight being in Australia in June. That was one report I saw from ESPN. I don't think it would be June. I'm hearing more July, August, and more likely overseas in Dallas, for, of course, Spencer's home turf, Dallas Cowboys' home ground there. So I'd be shocked if it was in Australia. I don't think Errol would come all this way. I think it's more likely that he would say, well, you want a piece of me, you come to my backyard and we do it in Dallas. So I do it Texas. So yeah, look, I don't know much more than that. I don't think there's anything concrete. There's been some talks. There's no contract signed to this point. But it's trending in the right direction that Tim Tszyu would fight Spence, which would just be massive. I mean, what a blockbuster fight it would be, Macca, for Australian boxing fans, and we'd love to be a part of it, hopefully.
Last one for you. We saw Eddie Hearn announce his deal with Foxtel here in Australia earlier this week. What's your insight into how boxing will look here in Australia this year?
Oh, look, I'm excited, Macca. Look, I really hope. I hope that all the promises and the expectations from Matchroom are materialised. I think this is wonderful. I've said this before. I think duopolies are magnificent things in sport. I think it elevates both parties. I think competition and particularly competitive tension is always good. I look, No Limit are world class operators. I think Matchroom's incursion into Australia shouldn't be seen as a denigration of No Limit in any way. I think it enhanced both parties. I think Matchroom's probably got some tyranny of distance issues to overcome, and even finding local suppliers of talent. And they're doing that. Of course, they've got Steve Della that they've worked with. They've worked with Nick Francis before. So there's a very good stable of boxes in Australia that could certainly supplement their cards, bolster their cards, provide some really good action here in Australia. And look, I think they're going to be on the Fox Sports platform, so they'll need to provide some quality cards, credible cards, and ones that optically look good for the Australian audience and that are satisfactory for Fox Sports' production. So, look, I'm excited about what Eddie Hearn can do. He's a world class operator. He's put on some of the biggest fights we've ever seen. He's had 90,000 crowds. You can't dispute Eddie Hearn's gravitas and his business acumen. So I think having him in Australia, in the Australian market, is magnificent. I hope he can deliver on what he wants to do, because it would only help our boxing economy. And we just want to see the best fights, Macca, and the best opponents and the best opportunities for our boxers. So let's hope Eddie comes here and really arrives with a bang.
Legend, Pete. Always appreciate your time, mate, and we'll catch up soon.
No worries, Macca. Anytime, buddy.